the institute in 1979 as a student, and I was a student of Professor Madhav Gadgil. And he was, I would say, the foremost thinker when it comes to, how do we achieve conservation in the country. It's not, not only did he play a major role in bringing a more modern, what I would call a modern biological evolutionary approach to the study of nature, of wildlife, of ecology, and all of that, which is actually stimulated. In fact, I always say that today, Bangalore is not just the IT capital of the country, it's also the ecology capital of the country. It has probably the largest critical mass of people who are engaged in ecological sciences, evolutionary sciences, conservation biology, and so on and so forth. And it's really because of the vision of Professor Madhav Gadgil, who started this program at this institute, way back in the mid 1970s, and I was privileged to be one of his students. At the same time, he has been very cognizant of the fact that it is not just how much conservation that we achieve. Okay, we want to go on increasing the tiger population of the country, but along with that comes conflict. I can aspire to to have a much larger elephant population than what we have today, but that will come with enormous conflict, and the cost is borne by the rural communities, tribals, and indigenous farmers, and so on and so forth. So Professor Madhav Gadgil had the vision to talk about sacred grouse, about the need for the indigenous knowledge systems. He wrote papers about it. And I don't really need to introduce Professor Madhav Gadgil to any great extent. As a student, I'm handicapped in talking more about him at this stage. But what I'll do is that he was one of the foremost thinkers in our country as to how we achieve conservation. It's not about just how much conservation we achieve, but in what manner do we achieve conservation, which is very, very important to our dialogue today. Because very many people just completely forget this fact. They just want to achieve conservation, more and more conservation, more tigers, more elephants, more areas under protected, area status like wildlife sanctuaries and national parks and so on. Completely, negligent of the fact that the people are a part of nature in India for millennia, over millennia, and have adopted lifestyles, have had a close relationship with nature. So we need to bring all this in. So we need to have our own Indian model of conservation, of nature conservation, taking into consideration our national circumstances and given our long, historical traditions and so on and so forth. So with these few words and a small introduction to Professor Madhav Gadgil, who kind of set up the ecology program here, and this has been kind of grown into, Bangalore being the ecology capital of the country. Let me turn over the mic to him for his introductory or his remarks on the theme of this conference. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Namaskara. I am delighted to be here, and since Sukumar has laid out the much broader background to this whole issue of nature and conservation, and perhaps new issues that are emerging in times of climate change, that I think I will not get into that at all. I got to know M.A. Parsarthi personally, to my pleasure, in 1973, when I was appointed to the Indian Institute of Science, and that's when, of course, Sukumar also talked about his meeting him. He was, I and he mutually shared interest in nature conservation issues. Then I was fortunate enough, as I said, to join the Indian Institute of Science. I was appointed as a mathematical biologist because I had done a thesis in mathematical ecology. But Professor Dhawan was a very broad-minded director, and I told him that I was interested in wildlife, nature conservation, and he encouraged me that, yes, besides your formal activity, mathematical biology, which you must continue, which I did, I was very free to take up activities on these fronts. I was involved with Bombay Natural History Society for a long time. Actually, my father was a member from before I was born, and he gifted me at the age of 21 life membership of Bombay Natural History Society. And I knew Salim Ali from a very young age. In fact, I decided to become a field ecologist, charmed by his knowledge, wit, enthusiasm when I was still a high school student. Then Zafar Fateh Ali was a honorary secretary of Bombay Natural History Society. He had moved to Bangalore by 1973, and he was involved in setting up the World Wildlife Fund's activities. The Southern Regional Office was to be set up in Bangalore, and Mr. M.A. Parthasarathi most enthusiastically had offered to host this office. And then Zafar and Mr. Parthasarathi wanted me to serve on this Southern Regional World Wildlife Funds Committee. And that is how I got to know Parthasarathi and his family, Mrs. Svedvalli and Mimi, and I spent a lot of very enjoyable time with them, primarily because I was able to persuade the IUCN to donate a whole series of wildlife-related scientific journals, magazines, to be lodged in the library of the Southern Regional Office of World Wildlife Fund, and that all those were lodged in Sarthi's house. And I was all the time coming, he lived very close to the Indian Institute of Science where I was working. So I was all the time coming and spending time in this lovely house by the side of the Sankey tank and reading through those. And then, of course, chatting with him and the family. And I had the privilege of going with all of them to Temmangundi on Baba Budangiris at his father-in-law's estates. And as I said, I had a wonderful time with the family. Later, I slowly got involved in other activities, in particular, Murarrao Ghorpade, who was then the finance minister. He was very keen on my getting involved in monitoring the way bamboo resources of the states were being managed by paper mills and others. And so I started working much of my time in the field in Uttar Kannada district at Dandeli and elsewhere. And the time I spent in Bangalore reduced further and further. And in 1977, there was this new government, and H.M. Patel, the finance minister, he chaired the Indian Board of Wildlife and Project Tiger Steering Committee. He knew me personally for a long time through my educational career and what I was interested in. So he inducted me into that. And then I didn't want too many activities, so I left the Southern Regional World Wildlife Committee's membership. And slowly our association, which was very constant and warm for a few years, it reduced over time. But of course, I have continued to be interacting with them. And of course, I was delighted to hear from Mimi that there was this conference going to be held to pay tribute to him.
Thank you, Madhav Uncle. But may I ask you an important question? You know, you're one of the most senior, most legends in the space of wildlife conservation, and I've actually taken on several governments, institutes, and various other bodies. What made you be resilient? What made you sustain your effort in the space of research in this space? Because I think the next generation, and the way forward in terms of this is going to be an uphill task. And so what is it that made you resilient? What is it that made you say, I need to continue this great work that I'm doing, and I need to just be where I am?
Well, I don't know. It has to do so much with personal background, but apart from personal background, at home, both my parents and Iravati Karve, who was a very distinguished anthropologist, sociologist, who was both involved with nature conservation and human rights. She was the first person in 1961 to take up a study of rehabilitation of people displaced by dams. So there was all this background. And then I had the opportunity to be a student at Harvard, and E.O. Wilson, who of course is also well known in this, apart from being a great ecologist, environmental, evolutionary biologist in the field of nature conservation. He became very fond of me, and we spent a lot of time. And he told me that, listen, Madhav, I know this about you. Most people in their life undergo a Brownian motion. Brownian motion is in physics, particles are floating around and something bumps into them, they go in one direction, and another thing bumps into them, they go in another direction. He said, no, I have never followed this Brownian motion in my life, in Wilson's life. I knew what I wanted to do and I've done it. And I am confident that you will know what you want to do and you will do it. So I guess I don't know. I fortunately, because of, and then the great education at Harvard apart from that, and then I came back to India, determined, of course, very happily to be here. I love this country and its linguistic diversity. By the way, I must mention that Chiranjeevi Singh, I believe, is here, and he and I both have mother tongues which are not Kannada, but I used to enjoy chatting with him in Kannada. So, I love many languages of this country, and many people I have had opportunities to spend, and I took special efforts to spend time in the Northeast. Today there is this awful conflict going on in Manipur. I had a PhD student who was a Maite, and then he did a study with the Kuki village. So I stayed for many days in the house of this Kuki chieftain, and I saw this whole interaction going on. So I had, this opportunity to learn so much about the country. I enjoyed it. So,
what would be your, if I may ask you an important question, what would be your three main, advice or, a path forward which you would give for the next generation? Since, what would you say are the three most important things that the next generation and everybody else who's involved in wildlife conservation and nature conservation, what do you think that would be the three main things that you would give us as advice?
I don't know. Maybe this Sukumar anyway summed it up. I think nature conservation is unfortunately often an elitist endeavor. And in this country, the elite are alienated from the masses of the people. And this is, at the bottom of much that Sukumara talked about, the conflicts, the human rights issues and so on, and faith in bureaucracy and guns and guards. And I have no faith in bureaucracy and guns and guards, I must say. So those who aspire to really have a genuine movement for nature conservation built in this country must become one with the common people of the country and should not, currently there is no question about it, the urban conservationists are alienated from the common people of the country. This must cease, and then I think that's the way ahead. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Madhav Gadgil uncle, for being part of this wonderful session. And I must thank you for being here, for making the time. And I hope you will watch the rest of the sessions online. Thank you again, Madhav uncle. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Vinay, for inviting me. Thanks a lot. Namaskara.